So if you look at how they chose to end it, it's a very low-key ending. We see Molly and Issa together at dinner. Presumably they're working things out, but I don't know, we'll see next season. Presumably it's a good conversation, they're patching things up, but we don't hear the conversation, the camera just pans out, and it seems kind of a bit anticlimactic. You were wanting to see this kind of blowout between them that had been building up all season, so to see them just silently fixing things as the camera pans out, in some ways it feels a bit anticlimactic, but I think it's a good ending, and it kind of brings everything full circle to what the show has always been about, and it's always fundamentally been about this strange relationship between Issa and Molly, characters who maybe they shouldn't even be friends, and it seems strange that they maybe even are friends because they're not that similar, they're very different, and it's a very interesting dynamic that you see in this show, and then also the other HBO show, Girls, that it gets compared to all the time. It's actually the exact same dynamic between the two central friends. Now, you have Issa, who's creative, funny, financially she's a mess, she lacks ambition and discipline, but is very likable, gets along with people, very involved in culture. Then you have Molly, who is kind of polar opposite. She's a bit judgmental, a little bit snobby, has her financials completely together, has her career, very driven, but also struggles because she's not quite as likable, not quite as funny. And these two characters kind of come together in the somewhat weird bond of codependency, and maybe they're a bit jealous of each other because each one has something the other doesn't. They both kind of snipe at each other and criticize each other when neither of them has their stuff together. And the fact that they both struggle in their own ways kind of brings them together, and that's what's anchored the show for all 4 seasons. Issa's had different relationships, she's had struggles in her career, we see some of that, but other than that, really what anchors the show and is consistent throughout is this friendship between these two characters. Kelly's mostly comic relief, Tiffany's, this is the first episode she's ever really had her own storyline. Really, she's just held up as a kind of contrast to show someone who's genuinely happy, has their life together, comparing to Molly, who seems very unhappy, and Issa, who struggles a lot. Even Kelly seems relatively happy, has it together, and again, it's just kind of held up as a comparison to Issa and Molly, who really struggle and can't seem to get it together, and really the only thing they have, and that's what this episode drove home at the end, was they both kind of, their relationships that they were in respectively seem to be falling apart, and what you're left with at the end is they have no one else other than, I mean, Molly has her career, but, you know, that's pretty empty as far as, you know, fulfilling. So really, at the end, they're left with just the two of them, for better or worse, because again, they don't always seem like the best of friends, and they don't always seem like they get along or like each other or even have that much fun together, but really they're all they have, and they've got to just, neither of them maybe want to be there in that last scene. Maybe neither of them really want to fix things, and they really wish they could just walk away from each other and say that's that, but they can't because they're all they have. And you know, it's just an interesting dynamic, and it's interesting on the show Girls, you know, it's the exact same dynamic. Lena Dunham's character, Hannah, creative, funny, quirky, didn't really have a lot of direction, not a lot of discipline, always was struggling with money. And then you had Marnie, who was much more conventionally attractive, had money, never struggled with money, but was a bit judgmental, a bit neurotic, and it was kind of the cool, fun, quirky, but, you know, struggling and not conventionally attractive pair of the relationship. Always kind of in this weird, jealous, loving relationship with the person who seems to have it all, conventionally attractive, has money, but just doesn't have that charm and that quirkiness that the other one uses so well. So it's just interesting, you see these two different shows that have been compared, and superficially you could say, oh, well, you know, one is for girls in their mid-20s, one is for women in their late 20s, early 30s, and it's just a superficial comparison. But no, it's really actually very, very similar. If you look at the heart of both shows, it's around this female friendship between these two very different personalities. So it's interesting that to see these two shows both come back to the same dynamic. And I can't think of another show with men that has the same dynamic played out. So it's interesting that these two female-led shows both of them have kind of gravitated around this odd dynamic, and there's been so many shows with guys and men and different friendships, and you've never really seen this dynamic. So that's just an interesting thing. So it's kind of a, in some ways, anticlimactic way to finish it. You kind of wish that you would have seen more of the blow up or more of the conversation, but I do like how they did kind of bring things full circle and drive home the point that that's what the show's always been about. It's been about these two characters who have issues and struggle, can't get it together, but they have each other, even if that's not always seem to be very much, because they get on each other's nerves and they really butt heads and they don't treat each other very well. And you really saw that this season where Issa, she's in her head and she's anxious and she's always in her own head, and that can be very quirky and fun, but it also can be kind of crappy because she's so much in her own head, she's so much thinking about her own insecurities and her own anxieties and her own career and her own struggles that she's not really able to be there for Molly a lot of the time. And that, I think, was the straw that broke the camel's back, where Molly really needed support, and Issa just had so much going on and always has so much going on with her art and her creativity and her dreams and her insecurities and her neuroticisms that she couldn't be there for Molly. So again, it's interesting. We see a show that's really about this friendship being all these two people really have. At the end of the day, they really just have each other to get through, but they're not that good to each other fundamentally, and you know, it's not the best friendship, but it's all they have.